Hey everyone, I'm Dan Fredenberg, and I'm involved in commercial real estate syndication, and I do podcasts on that subject. But Yasmeen is well aware that my own journey has not been what most people would call smooth sailing, and it has made it really important for me to pay it forward to the next generation because I think that that is the responsibility of successful people in general. So, in order to help people, though, I found that I have to address a few factors. One of them's race, another one's gender, and the problem with that, of course, is it paints an enormous target on my back. But the fact is, if race or genders, if they are factors in success or the lack of it, then those exact factors should be nameable, and we should be able to figure out how to finesse it or work around it or something. But this was Yasmeen's baby, this piece of content, and I'm really excited about it. Yasmeen, do you want to introduce yourself and say what we're doing?
Yeah, sure. I'm really excited. Thanks so much, Dan. So my name is Yasmeen. I am born and raised in Boston, or Bostonian. My parents are immigrants, so I'm first generation. My father is Middle Eastern and my mother is Brazilian, so I had a very multicultural background. I was originally into medicine. Any other piece of content that Dan and I have made, you probably know the story. I was going to go into medicine, and then through a series of events, I ended up deciding I wanted to be a business owner. Specifically, I ended up opening a business in financial consulting because I was in the dark about how to invest my money. And I wasn't supposed to know how to invest my money culturally, as it just wasn't expected for me to know how money works or what to do with it or to be a business mogul. That's just not really a thing. And then when I entered the world of financial consulting, I was told several times that no one would take me seriously because the image of wealth is a man. It doesn't have to be a white man anymore, technically, but it's a man. So I decided that that was just going to motivate me even further. And I wanted to create a space and a business that makes it a very comfortable environment for me to teach other people about how money works, so on and so forth. And I also got into real estate investing. That's how I know Dan. And these two lovely ladies over here are in a similar mentorship program with me. And we are all getting into the multifamily space for commercial properties. And I wanted to go ahead and extend the opportunity for them to share their stories because we all know, like between the three of us, what it's like to be a woman in this space. And we all have amazing stories to share. And just like you, Dan, it's not been smooth sailing for us. So we're going to connect over that.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely beautiful. So, who do you want to introduce first, Ava or Rosa? Or are you going to go through them each before your first question?
Yeah, and I also
Okay.
hear you with
How about we go?
delay.
All right.
Okay, so then I'll take over, and since
Why
you're on the
don't
top of my
you, let's start with
screen,
Rosa.
Ava.
Why don't both your hand about yourself?
Sure, or
So
do what she said.
what she asked? Sorry, I didn't hear her.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so Ava, you already answered first, so maybe you want to introduce yourself a little bit
Sure,
so we can get some ideas.
sure, yeah. I'm Ava, and nice meeting you, Dan. Thank you so much for having us. Thanks to Yasmeen for connecting us. I'm based in Boston, like Yasmeen. I got to know her in a multifamily seminar, and since then we've been like working together and talking about this stuff and networking. I'm coming from a research background, actually. In university I studied gender studies, and I've been in a research and analytics world for like almost 10 years. Coming from like Middle East, I've been working on humanitarian project for a little while back in Afghanistan. And then when I moved here, I started getting to know more about the real estate business. And one of the reasons that, I'm really passionate about this field and I'm really want to work on it is that I always thought of like generating wealth for my family. And because my family like lost everything that they had. My father was an entrepreneur, but he started from zero 2 times. He got really successful, but lost everything again because of war. And that has been always on my mind, that how can I, continue his legacy and like build everything again for my family. So, and since I know it's a safer investment in real estate, so I started here, and like I started getting to know more people like yourself and like Yasmeen, and that's why I'm here today.
All right, beautiful. And Yasmeen, her connection dropped again. So Rosa, how about you? Do you want to give some background to the audience?
Absolutely. Yes. So thank you so much, Dan, for the opportunity. Nice to meet you, Eva, as well. And Jasmine, thank you so much for the opportunity and thinking about us, like very similar backgrounds. Even though I see like Jasmine another category and Eva as well going to school. So a little bit of myself. I grew up with my grandparents. Um, in like the suburbs in El Salvador, so Central America. I I always knew that I had a better purpose because even though my mom and my dad they all hustles a lot, they work hard, the field like growing corn and beans and all of that. But my mom doesn't know how to read or write. She didn't have the opportunity to go to school, and I wanted to change that. And I am the first one that made it to college. Unfortunately, when I came here, I couldn't finish college because of my immigration status. And that's how I looked for other things to do. And then it came to my mind, oh, multifamily looks like right to me. And it's a great place where I can also bring people to participate. Like putting their money to work if they don't know how to, because there's a lot of my community that they don't know how to invest, they don't know how to make any deals, but now I can invite them to join and also help them grow and also help my family.
I love that. And one of the biggest things that jumped out about your backstory, it reminds me, my mother-in-law, because I lived in Taiwan for 15 years and I married a Taiwanese woman. My mother-in-law, she never learned how to read either. And so, of course, Chinese is a nasty language to learn in general how to read, but she never did that. But my wife got her degree, her bachelor's, and that was in a family where she also got that attitude like, but you're a girl, what are you doing studying? And it's funny because like I'm a little bit older than I look, but my wife is young enough that that is not like typical for people her age to have a family like that. So it's something that I think is really important. But I have a one thing that came out about your past was you mentioned Afghanistan, and if I think of how the situation could be, especially for women, uh, the the book Three Cups of Tea, if you've ever seen it, I read that, and that has colored a lot of my information and my understanding about what things are like over there. And the most important little takeaway from that book, for me personally, was the decision to educate girls instead of boys. And their reasoning was that girls stay in their town after they're educated, whereas men are more likely to move to the city and stay there. Uh, who wants to take that off as far as like, does that sound like something that you've noticed in all of your backgrounds, or who wants to start?
Yeah, I think like I want to start something about that. And when during the time that I was in Afghanistan, there was a lot of like focus on girls' education, and that's because this gender group have been deprived of their rights for so many years. And like when the woman in the family is not educated, they cannot upbring the kids, and like there are a lot of like those responsibilities that comes with it. And most of the development projects were focused on them. But unfortunately, there was a lot of like cultural barriers, that, although like the opportunity was there, still not everyone could access it.
Interesting, interesting. And Yasmeen, you know that one of the reasons why I was so eager to express this subject is because I've got a habit on the internet of trying to get canceled. And so I try to talk about whatever I think will get me in a ton of trouble. And just to see what ends up happening, but I'm always careful not to be a jerk about it. So to tee off that one, like what you were just describing, it reminds me a little bit of when I was in university. I had some classmates who were from Botswana, and they were amazing people. But between them and some of the people from the Caribbean that I met, one term that they pick on a little bit would be the term African American. And the reason why they pick on it was because their attitude is like, I've got shoes that are more African than you are. It would be the things that they'd end up saying. And that's the kind of thing that gets you into trouble. But the reason I bring that up is because this is the thing that'll get me killed way faster, which is comparing the situation abroad compared to the situation for women in, I'll call it Anglo-Saxon culture. So I mean North America, I mean the UK, you could even also say across Europe. I think it's vastly different. Okay, the hurdles that women have in North America, like you just can't even compare it to these other places. What does that bring to mind for anybody who wants to comment?
Do you guys hear me all right? By any chance?
Now we can, yeah.
Thank God. Okay. Besides my mishap earlier with the internet, there's a lot of truth in that. So it's not a walk in the park, here in the USA, but it is definitely harder overseas. And I have family overseas. And so for me, that was actually my motivation to keep going, to be a financial consultant, to get into the multifamily space as a woman, because for me, if not here, then where? Do you know what I mean? So I definitely agree there's more hurdles, but I mean, these two ladies are both immigrants, so they crossed oceans in order to be here and have the opportunity to be successful as women. And I mean, I'm just going to let you ladies, take it from there, because that's amazing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Yasmeen, that it's, as you said, like it's not a walking in the park, because first of all, you come to this business and you see like all people are almost from the same background, born and raised in the US, English is their first language, mostly white men. And then second position are white women, and then you cannot see yourself there, right? You're not in the picture. And a lot of this business is based on networking and, building friendship and that network, that you need to be successful in the field. And that comes with like, we all are biased, right? We all have the affinity bias. So it's like less chance for me as an immigrant woman and as a a person of color to work in this space and be able to build the network successfully as others can. But still, at least there is no barriers for me to get into a space. Yeah, it's more work, it's harder, and compared to others, but at least I have the platform, and if I want to enter, nobody can stop me from entering the space and like start working on it. So yeah, it has its own barriers, but in the same time, it's way, way better than the situation that I would have on the other side of the world.
And Rosa, what's your take?
So this is, I see it from another perspective. I see it like I see myself with a lot more opportunities than I had back home. And it's because of the people that I know, that I get to know, the places that I visit. I work in a fine dining restaurant, so I'm surrounded by a lot of like successful men and women. And sometimes I don't get to like I don't get the I don't feel myself comfortable talking about them because I see them like in a higher, way higher level than myself. So I think I one of the problems is that we sell ourselves short for what we know, and it shouldn't be like that. And it can be probably because English is not my first language. And some of them are amazing. Like my regulars, they believe more in me than what I believe in myself, and that's something that I need to change. Like right
Mhm.
now, and that a lot of like I hear a lot of women of color or Latin women talk about the same thing. I'm like I'm afraid to talk that I know how to do this because I'm afraid for the outcome, for what they might ask too many questions that I'm not able to answer. And so I see it all, like I see that we have all the opportunities in the world here comparing to back home. Like back home, I wouldn't even have the chance to go to school because it's too dangerous. Or you don't know if you're gonna come home, like or not, or you're gonna get kidnapped or whatever it is, or one of the members can just talk to you and force you to get into a gang with them. So that's why us women are like private to all of those things. And besides economically too,
Mhm.
like
Mhm. Mhm.
so
That is
that
Yeah,
so
yeah.
true.
Rosa, you touched on something very, very important,
Yes.
and you could see me and Yasmin couldn't wait to comment on that. And one of them is the language and lingual barriers, and also this field is full with like verbiages, you know, like financial terms, legal terms, that like it's hard for even people who were born and raised here and language English is their first language, but then as a like person who English is your second language, it feels overwhelming, you know, and it feels like, oh, okay, I cannot learn all these things at first. So I totally can relate to that.
Oh my God. I want to touch on the self belief. So, the funny thing is, I remember reading a statistic years ago that men are twice as likely to apply for jobs that they're not qualified for than women. Women will not apply for a job unless they check all the boxes. And it's just, and I know, Rosa, you even mentioned Latin women. I'm half Latin, and I'm also half Middle Eastern, and Ava's Middle Eastern, so I can relate to both of you. You're both like my two halves right here in one video, right? And so one thing I have to say is both cultures have that in common, is like women are encouraged to be humble. We're never encouraged to
yeah,
be confident. And when we show confidence, that's usually so aggressively stepped on and looked down on that it kind of just like shakes us. I remember that one time I was at this I want to say Islamic school, but Islam, I don't want to give a bad name to that religion because I am Muslim, but it's a more cultural thing. I was at this school when I was a kid that I would go to every Saturday, right? And I would laugh. I have this nice loud laugh that I've learned to love. But when I was a child, one of the female teachers, and to no fault of her own, that's her own conditioning, one of the female teachers heard me laughing and she scolded me and she was like, that's so bad. You're attracting too much attention to yourself. Cover your mouth when you laugh. Don't laugh so loud. And then for literally 5 or more years after that, if I laughed, I would look down and cover my mouth. Like they get you in every way, in your body language, in everything. And we live in a world where the picture of a successful entrepreneur or business person is a man with a lot of confidence and high energy. And I just really wanted to bring that up, is like not every, successful entrepreneur, and that kind of atmosphere, like we're not fans. So, but that doesn't mean that we're not entrepreneurs, and it's okay if an entrepreneur looks different, whether it's because she's a woman or, whether or not she has as much energy as Tony Robbins, even though I love Tony Robbins, to the very core of me. Not everyone is raised to have that
yeah,
attitude. So
yeah,
I had to say it because that's really my thing. It doesn't mean we don't know what we're doing. We were just raised differently. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you got a lot to unravel there. There's a few different parts about it, right? Because one of them is, of course, your implying that guys are just like, oh, well, that's just who we are. We'll apply for stuff that we're not qualified for. Whereas, like, my perspective, especially from like all the way from being itty bitty, it's vastly different. My interpretation in my community, of course, this is a North American community. I did mention that I lived in Taiwan for 15 years, and I got right in with their culture and their interpretation of gender roles and what they encourage and cultivate and all that kind of stuff. It's quite different, right? But the way that boys are raised where I'm from is, okay, you got to do something where you're the breadwinner, because then that's the key to getting everything that you want in life. Okay, but they turn around to the girls and say, but you, honey, you can be whatever you want, including like going to university and paying $40,000 a year in tuition and all that kind of stuff to learn how to do interpretive dance, which is not really the best way to have a successful career. And so like basically like there's that uneven playing field of where like if you don't bring home the bacon, so to speak, if you're not the breadwinner, then you're basically a failure as a man.
Right.
And so like that option is just not there. But I do love that self-selecting part that you emphasized as well, Yasmeen. And because we've been talking about success in the past, I think that it's pivotal to understand that it's an across the board thing. Everybody has to be self-advocate. Yeah, you have to be assertive. You have to ask for a raise. And it doesn't matter what you have in your pants. If you don't ask for a raise, you're not getting it. So that's the thing that I think everybody can take away from this. And but I do think that there are other factors. I just do think that there's much more pressure on men to get into that, that 1% of the 1% of the 1% position. And we're also not given the parachute, the ripcord to say, it's like, nope, I'm out. I'm going to be a primary caregiver. It's like, that's not in the cards for just about any guy, as far as I'm concerned. So those are some of the things that come to my mind. Are there any remarks on, because like I get that like overseas it's a different story altogether.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is that I think there's a lot around the world when they talk about oppression of certain parts of the population, and so I'll talk specifically about oppression of women around the world. There's a large degree of, in my mind, of it takes two to tango, and I think its fellow women are encouraging this oppressive behavior, and not just men saying, "Hey, you have to be like this. You can't be like that." Do you want to start from there? Because I want to hit the restaurant thing that I mentioned to you before, Yasmeen, for in Islamic countries. But
yeah, definitely.
Anybody have? Yeah.
So there's definitely so much truth to what you said. I think like I didn't have the upbringing that you had, Dan, because even though I was born in America, my parents are straight from their motherlands. You know what I mean? So I'm definitely not. Even though I was born here, not very American in culture, but definitely more American in culture than somebody who would have been born in Brazil or the Middle East. But I'm just this huge mix. So you have a lot of validity in what you said, and being a man, especially in the USA, is not easy. I think like what you mentioned with the girls having more leeway, that's something I see in my husband's family. With his siblings, is like the men had to be the breadwinners, but the girls could have, their space to figure things out and not be financially pressured. That isn't the case for everyone. So it's really dependent. But when it comes to women, it's kind of like the teacher that I mentioned. I don't like to have a heavy heart when I say it. I said no fault of her own, it was her conditioning, but it is conditioning. Right? It's every woman that is conditioned that women aren't supposed to do this. You're going to parrot that to your children unless you make that conscious decision, like this doesn't have to be a limitation. So for me, it's like I have had to spend years, and I'm going to be spending years, overcoming a lot of limiting beliefs that I've learned from my two cultures. And before I have a daughter, I want to be able to give her the right example. And it's just, we're all part of a cycle. we learn to teach the bad habits if we don't overcome them. And we learn to teach the limiting beliefs and the limitations if we don't overcome them. And to your point that women don't have that pressure for financial stuff, that's true. And it kind of breaks my heart because women aren't even encouraged to have financial responsibility. And I think that they should be, because that's the key to freedom. I'm not going to speak for the USA, but I can speak for what I've seen overseas in my families and in those communities that I've gotten to intimately know. There's a lot of women who stay with abusive men because they cannot afford anything else. And that's what really breaks me, right? So it's like I've literally had people in my own family stay with abusive men and been like, what are you doing? And, you know, I'm not going to name any names or get into too many details because, you know, that's family. But the answer is always, but I don't know what to do if they're not there. I don't know how I'm going to feed myself. And I vowed when I was a child and I witnessed that I was going to learn how money works and that I was never going to allow my daughter to ever say that in her life. You know what I mean? So that's my take on that.
Yeah, I love everything you just said, and I think that I should qualify a little bit based on my own experience. So with my own wife, when we had our first kid, there was a choice of like, do we pay a nanny to take care of the kid when I'm not able to, so that she can go back to her job, or we did the math and it was like about 2/3 of the paycheck would go to the caregiving, and I'm like, well, why don't I pay an extra 30% and have somebody who actually loves my kid take care of my kid? And personally, I think that's an ideal situation. You know, like if you can actually afford that, and I could only afford it because I was in Taiwan, right? So my wife ended up being the primary caregiver for the first few years after the first like 6 months or something. But really, it brought out the fact that even when you have somebody who's actually benevolent, okay, and I think very few people are, okay, so like, you know, and I'm talking about myself as far as benevolent, you know, as I'm going like, I never want to lord the fact that I was bringing money in and she wasn't over my wife. But the thing is, like, even if you're not giving any signs, you're not giving any body language or anything like that, it's still going to be on your mind. And that's why I totally agree, and this is the attitude I have with my daughter, is that I don't care what's in your pants. You should make it so that financially you're not beholden to anybody. You make your own rules. And I don't believe that we should be saying, okay, this is okay for you, that's not okay for you, sort of thing. And but that's why we're in here, right? So it's pretty wild how much can come of all this kind of stuff. And you know, like my wife now, she does support herself again, and it's a good thing, because when you get into commercial real estate, you're going to have a drought. You're going to have to tighten your belt a lot. And so it was good that she was able to do that. So for a while, she was the breadwinner while I was trying to make this stuff work. And I think everybody on both sides, they need to have that experience, because like my wife wanted to do the stay-at-home mother thing for a little while, and then she found out it's like, nah, it's not really what she wanted either. So it's tough that, you know, all people, we change all the time. Like one day this is what we want, and the next day it's we want something different. And then all we end up hearing are the complaints, and we think that there are definitely problems, but anyway, so Yasmeen, what are some other little bits and pieces that you think people need to understand if they're going to get a real 360 view of where I guess femininity and I don't know why they started using equity instead of equality. I don't like. Are you aware of why they changed that terminology? Because it always used to be like, when you're talking about the different races, they're talking about equality, and now everybody's saying equity, which is weird because we're in commercial real estate, and equity is a very specific thing that has nothing to do with race or gender. So, does anybody know the secret of that?
I can explain a little bit because I'm working in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So,
excellent.
So, you know, when we are talking about equality, it means giving everyone the same resources and the same opportunities. But imagine, like, there is a visualization for this to explain the concept. But imagine if, like, someone is like is shorter and someone is taller, and both of them wanna look up from a fence, and you give them the
Hmm.
same, chair, the same height
Hmm.
chair, and ask them to look. The person who is shorter never gonna see over the fence, and that's being equality. When we are talking about equity, we are saying give everyone the things, the opportunities that they need, meet them where they are, rather than like looking at everyone as everyone is the same. So when it comes
Hmm.
to race and gender, that comes into play in a way that historically some races and also like women have been deprived from many resources and many opportunities. So now that we are trying to help them to catch up, when we are playing this catch up, we should give them what they need, not that like, oh, we are giving you the same opportunity as men have. So I hope that
Mm.
helps.
That was
Hmm.
a really good explanation.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I heard another version of it that said that the issue is like governments promising equality of outcome rather than another kind. Is that another thing that we can explain a little bit about what's the difference?
I haven't heard of that. Yasmin, do you have any comment on that?
No, and I think that no matter what you give anyone, the outcome will be different because everyone has the free will to utilize,
Yeah.
like how resourceful are you and how bad do you want it? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. So next segment, Yasmin, what's the next question you got?
All right. So this is the question that I really want to ask you two ladies. So now that you've introduced yourselves and you've shown us that you're resourceful and nothing's going to stop you, you touched a little bit on real estate. So touch a bit more. Why real estate? What do you hope to do? What are your goals? Just anything that you feel you want to share. You don't have to share anything, everything. Just what you're comfortable with sharing about your goals, what roles you have, why, whatever you think is going to be fitting for you guys.
Yeah. So for me, honestly, the reason I chose real estate, so there was a long time in my life that I was always very into, I was watching these like flipping houses shows, and I was very interested in that. I'm very like into like interior decoration and everything and design. But then I started being like very interested in it. But then I also was looking in the ways to have safe investments, to build wealth. So, and I know that real estate historically has been a like a rather safer choice for many people. And then when I started like learning about it, I realized that when we are just trying to buy one house and two house and try to rent it out, that's not gonna build or generate wealth. That's gonna help to give you some source of like passive income, but it's not gonna end to generate wealth or anything, especially if you're talking about generational wealth. And then I started doing more research and I started getting to know about the multifamily business, that how that can exacerbate the success, and accelerate the journey. So, that's why I'm here, and what I'm hoping, and like I'm trying, the role that I'm trying to play with my team is being the capital raiser, bringing investors together, and helping everyone to benefit from that.
Awesome. And Rosa?
All right. So why multifamily? Same as Eva. I started dreaming about this three-family house, rent them out, and stuff like that. And then I moved to a multifamily unit like 4 years ago. I lived there for 3 years. I love the small space, and I started to imagine just to think, oh, how much does these people get into rent? It was like an 80 door unit. And I just started doing the math, and I'm like, this is great, but I will never be able to buy one of those. And then I started researching like there are multi-millionaires, like probably only one of them owns them, all the apartments. And then I discovered that there's a thing that we can syndicate, that we can have sponsors. And then the multi-family mindset showed up on my phone, and I was like, let me go to this. It was a free webinar at first. I was going through a lot of trouble in my house. I was going to a lot. I have a teenager. Today is her 16th birthday, so you know what I'm going through. So it was a lot. But then I was like, oh, there's some strings pulling me back, but I'm going to move forward and I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to go. I'm going to leave everything behind. And there's something good out there. So I went to the free webinar and they explained everything and I was shocked. And I think what moved me, like what pushed me forward to do it was because that way I can invite others to come and participate. And like I make money, they make money. And even better, I can talk to my Latino community, the ones who only speak Spanish. I've probably never heard of that. Probably they have their money sitting on their bank accounts, gaining 2 pennies a month. And that's a way to help others and to create generational wealth as well. So it was fascinating for me. So now I'm hungry to learn more, and I know it's a lot.
Oh my God, I
And
love
that's
it.
exactly a big misunderstanding out there, that keeps a lot of people behind, and not even like entering this space just because everyone thinks that all people in this business are the wealthy people, they were born wealthy, and they just have money, to go and buy things.
Not true. Exactly. Oh my God, you ladies, you just reminded me. I have a funny story. So, years ago, when I graduated college, this was when COVID started. And that was the beginning of my mindset journey and the biggest journey that I've had so far in my life, where I was like, what do I want to be? Do I want a business? What do I do? Everything was confusing and up in the air. And then there was this funny video that I watched, and it was about abundance. And then the woman in the video was like, every time you pass a building, you're passing by billions of dollars. Like, there's no shortage of money in the world. Like, scarcity mindset's completely false. It's made up. So feel abundant. When you're walking by a tree, imagine that it has like try to imagine 10,000 leaves on each tree after tree. Like, just know that everything is like abundance. And the funniest thing is, I started really having fun with it. I would drive around, and it's COVID, like no one was on the road, and I would like point to that building and that building on in Boston. I'd drive on the highway through Boston, and I'd be like, that building's like probably $5 billion, and I would just feel super abundant. And then I'd be like, that's mine, that's mine, that's mine. I started having so much fun. I was like just completely joking. That's mine, that's mine, that's mine. Like 2 years later, my husband invites me to this seminar where people are literally buying buildings, and I'm like, you're shitting me, right? This is not real. There's no way I'm here. Like, I was just joking, universe. I didn't mean it, but I guess I meant it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yasmin, I do the same, because every time I see these AWA buildings across Boston, I'm like, that's mine, that's mine.
Just claim it. You know what I mean?
That's
It'll
too
come.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of my mentor for multifamily. He was giving up this story of the Chrysler Building in New York. Apparently, it sold for about like $185 million. Which, if that doesn't sound like much, that's because it's not. And that was his whole take. He's like, man, I just wish I knew. And I started raising, because like if you own the Chrysler Building, then you can sit at any table you want, and people say, "Oh, hey, who's that person over there?" Oh, that person owns the Chrysler Building, and I don't really think that matters too much on if you tend to wear dresses or pantsuits or whatever. But the story I was mentioning earlier that Yasmeen's already heard me say, it's getting back to the gender part, which is it more has to do with in the Middle East and Islamic countries in general, because unlike in the parts of Asia that I've been in, or in Europe or whatever, it's the family area of a restaurant and the single men area of a restaurant. And I remember seeing this clip, I think it was an Anthony Bourdain No Reservations bit, and he was talking to a woman about like doesn't that feel like you're being oppressed because there's an area that you just can't you can't go there. You're being limited to this one only. And she turned it right around. She said, no, 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 no. It shows that the men can't be trusted. They don't behave well enough to be allowed to hang out with the rest of the families and all that sort of stuff. So that's why they need their own separate area. And that's quite the twist. And I don't know if that's wishful thinking on her part. I've only heard one person say it, so it's anecdotal. But I think that's one of the things that should give people a little bit of pause before before they start to pick apart different cultures. Does anybody want to tee that one off?
Yasmeen, do you want to start?
I guess I will. So the funny thing is, I actually watched a TED Talk last night that I recommend for everyone here and everyone watching, you viewers. It's called, what is it? Like The Power of Choice. And it's a TED Talk, and it was read by this incredible woman. And it just kind of shows that choice and the assumption that we all approach choice the same way is just, it's a wrong assumption to think that we all approach choice the same way. So when you pick apart somebody else's culture and you don't understand how they even view things or what their priorities are or what their values are, then you're entitled to your opinion. Everyone is, but you're also not really going to be building a connection. You're going to be building a distance. You're not going to be building a bridge. You're going to be building a fence. So, when people would analyze any of my cultures, Brazilian or Middle Eastern, I love when people ask questions, but when people wouldn't ask questions, when they would just throw their assumption on me, and they've never been to the Middle East, they don't have family there, they don't have skin in the game, or they don't speak a word of Arabic, or they don't understand anything, then I would just kind of sit there and be like, well, you're judging us through your lens and you don't even understand us, right? Like, you wouldn't do it to your neighbor, so don't do it to somebody else's culture. And as we've been super respectful on this call. Allow women, if you're going to talk about sexism, allow every woman from her own country to speak on it, because that's where she's from. Because she's allowed to say, this is how I feel. But even when you look at sexism, you can't look at it through the same Western lens, because different women will have different opinions too. So, yeah, it's not all black and white.
No, that's the best answer, Yasmeen, and I agree with that. And I would say, I'm not saying every woman is choosing, every woman out there, on the other side of the world, in the Middle East, is choosing what they do, and it's always optional. It's not here either, not all of us have all the options. Sometimes we have to do something in a certain way because the society is telling us, or family is asking us. So the same thing over there, but there are a lot of women that are choosing that on a daily basis, and they have the freedom and they're choosing, and that's it. When I was there, when I was in Afghanistan, I wouldn't drive as much. I would drive only if I was going to drive in my own neighborhood and not out in the city, just because it was not safe. So I wouldn't want to put myself in that situation. It was a war zone, and it was a country that was not safe for women overall. So that was protection for me. It was not that I was limiting myself, So yeah, there are a lot of reasons behind why people choose the way they live, on that side of the world, and the way that they behave. And that's something that we should all consider when we are thinking about it.
And Rosa, did you have anything to add on that one?
No, just kind of backing what Eva said. Same thing. Sometimes it's not meant to stop you from what you're doing. It's just that the surroundings just stops you. That you shouldn't go there because of what somebody else, some other generation had created, which is danger. Your parents are just trying to protect you, your family, everybody, and that might seem like they're putting limits on you as women, but unfortunately that's a way of protecting us as well and protecting each other. We already know I shouldn't visit that neighborhood because of this or that, and it's just we gotta change the way they were raised, so we can change what's about to come for our new generation, so they don't go through the same thing.
I completely agree. And one time in my life where I thought about that a lot was in Taipei, and it's for the opposite reason of what a lot of people would expect. It's because Taipei is so safe. It's just mind-blowingly safe there. Okay, like at the time, I had a grandmother in her 90s, and I would say it's like I can't even think of a street in the entire city where I'd be nervous if she was walking around with literal bills, like safety pinned to her clothes. Okay, it's like it's that level of safe, right? And the reason why that came out, and here's something pretty spicy for us to discuss, especially because we've got such a wide range of cultures here, which is there's a lot of discussion that's happened over the last 30 years about not victim shaming. And specifically, I'm talking about, if somebody dresses all hot, like they're, looking attractive, showing off a bunch of skin or something like that, that does not justify violence of any form. And that's absolutely right. And to your point a moment ago, where it's just like in some cities, there are just places you shouldn't go. It's and like it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It's just like the place is not a very safe place to be. So I understand how they could get conflated and confused super duper easily. But like that example of my grandmother walking around with like 100 NT bills or something on her clothes, like that was to draw attention to the perception of value. If there's a perception of value, then when you run into somebody who has no respect for rules, you've got a problem, because they're just going to go ahead and do that. And that goes into my next point, which is that I think traditionally, men are labeled with having less respect for rules, and or at least like my own perception, because even when I was a kid, you're never supposed to fight. You're not supposed to fight other kids. Did it happen? Absolutely 100%. If you had a big mouth, you're going to get hit. Okay? That's just how it works. And one of the things that I've noticed in myself, and part of it is cuz I'm not a huge dude, is recognize that like a lot of men have the same problem that women do, which is that if you're not careful, some guy's going to crack you. Okay? Like they're like I know that, and the thing is, because I've been hit before, I also know when to stop trying my luck. And I think some people who've had, more sheltered lives, they never got to that point where they realize, hey, I should, pump the brakes a bit here, or else there's going to be a problem, and I'm not going to be in charge of how it comes out. You guys are from all sorts of different places and cultures. What's your take? Like are there some gender generalizations there? Like, am I out to lunch? Like, what do you guys think?
I grew up in the ghetto. So I grew up in the ghetto in the USA, and I actually was a total tomboy. So I was the person getting into the fistfights. I remember this one kid made this racist comment towards me for being half Middle Eastern, and he ended up on a table. Like, so yeah, that was me. I was the person who said the answer is violence. But nowadays, I have to keep that confined. And now I just do boxing and fencing, and that's where I still get to be violent, but like in a politically correct space. You know what I mean? Like punching a bag, or if I stab someone, hey, there's consent. We're fencing. Like, we're supposed to stab each other. So am I low-key still violent? Yes. And that's the funny thing is, you said that, men are more, that it's sometimes thought of that men are more likely to break the rules than women. And I think the only reason that may be true in some cases is because in my experience and in my cultures, like in Middle Eastern culture, mistakes are not looked at with a very light eye. They're looked at very seriously and heavily. And I just think that women sometimes have to suffer from mistakes for a lot longer, or have such severe punishments, and we don't really get away with stuff. So we're often discouraged first and more harshly in life, from breaking the rules. But if you left it up to me and you didn't give me any cultural conditioning, I'm the biggest rule breaker. I'm the biggest person to start a fist fight and start trouble. Like, I really am. Like, that's just my spirit. You know what I mean? I'm a troublemaker. But, I just was more discouraged from it because I'm a girl. And I'm not going to get into too much because this could go for hours on all the horrible conditioning that I've been experienced with. But, in some cultures, a woman's reputation is quote unquote all she has. And once it's ruined forever, and no one will want to marry you. And what are you going to do? And your value is based off of who you marry, and it's not who you are as an individual. And so it's all that BS, you know what I mean? And then when it comes to clothes and looking hot, I'm just going to say this. In some cultures, it's normal to wear less clothes, my Brazilian half, and then in other cultures, not so much, my Lebanese half. It's all perception. Some cultures take clothes more seriously than others. And with women, I think one thing to think is don't think that if a woman chooses to wear longer clothing that she is oppressed. This is just a message for society. If a woman chooses to wear a veil or cover up, sometimes that's actually her form of empowerment. Like one of my best friends told me, "Oh my God, do you think just any man deserves to see my hair? Only my husband. What makes these, dusty ass people think that they deserve to see my hair?" Like she just put it like that,
Mhm.
And I love that. She treats herself like she's a temple. And I'm the opposite. I'm a girl who would be at the beach all day if it was up to me. That does not involve wearing a veil or wearing layers. You know what I mean? So it's all personal preference. Empowerment comes from what do you choose to wear? And it has nothing to do with you seeking attention or not seeking attention or being oppressed or not. It's just what do you like to wear? That's it. Yeah.
No, Yasmin,
I
yeah, you
love it.
explained it very well, especially in terms of Middle East. Yeah, I mean, like for women, definitely, if you try to be a breaker, it's gonna have more negative consequences that last even longer for you. And the thing is that there is a lot of pressure on women because the family's reputation kind of associates more with the female's reputation than the men or male family members. So they can do whatever they want, to some extent it's okay, but God forbids. But it's getting better. Now I know that after not being there for like almost 10 years, I hear stories of like women's empowerment that like it's mind blowing. It was like unimaginable during my time. But now with the growth of social media, internet, and everything, the culture is affected more globally than locally, and like you can see that, there are more rebels against like those like kind of inequalities and equities.
So Jasmine, you just made me remember about a story in my childhood. Like I was always labeled as like a tomboy, and oh, you're not supposed to do that because you're a girl. What are you doing with all those boys? I used to love riding a bike. I didn't own a bike. They did, and they would let me use their bike. And my grandma, everyone, everybody. What is that girl doing with all those boys? She shouldn't be there, and all of that. And when it comes to clothing, I remember this story when I was probably 14, 15 years old. I got this crop top. So I got this crop top and I put a layer of it was like transparent. They could see my belly. And I was walking by at another neighborhood, the neighborhood next to my neighborhood. And one of the guys sitting there, it was like a group of 4 or 5 guys. One of them screaming, and he said, "How much do you charge?" And I didn't even know what that meant. And then I asked somebody, and I said, they asked me how much do I charge? Like, what does that even mean? I was so innocent, and I was so happy that I was wearing something like. First of all, in my country, it's like 90 degrees all year long. I was so happy with my clothes, and then that just destroyed everything. And ever since then, now I rather just cover myself up.
Yeah. It tells me that I got to get my daughter a side hustle so that if somebody says, hey, what do you charge? Oh, well, if you want the Mercedes, it's this much. If you want, right? So that you have an answer that just pretends that the inappropriate thing was just like not even right.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm glad that you contributed. I also am really glad that you mentioned the immigration struggles, because I think this is a great time to mention one other thing that I think very few people, unless you have like immigrants in your circle, I don't think people understand this, because people think immigrants, they think, oh, it's poor people from around the world who come to the no, that is not how immigration works at all. Okay, if you arrive in Canada or in America and you're not an asylum seeker, your family was probably doing quite well where you're from, or else the answer would have been no. You know, and I think it's pretty incredible that so few people are aware of that. And does anybody want to say a thing or two about immigration? Because like obviously illegal immigration, I think you're not supposed to say that anymore. I think there's some other term, but like basically the way I look at it is that there's the way that is intended by the government, where you make your applications and you jump through those hoops and whatnot. But does anybody want to say anything about immigration in general and how it works? Yep, you're muted, Yasmeen.
Oh, Dan, that's totally true. And like, there are a lot of stigmas associated with immigration. And as soon as you say like I'm an immigrant, people think like, oh, you're an asylum seeker, or like someone, which is like nothing wrong with being an asylum seeker, even, But then there are a lot of things associated with that too, and that these people are coming here, taking over our jobs and everything. But for a lot of these people, they come here and work very hard from any background that they are coming. If they are in a position, even if they are just, in a lower socioeconomic condition, they are working harder than others to get what they have, So it's like nothing comes free, and everyone is working hard. And for me, for example, I came as a student. I went to the UK and started studying, and I was paying, people pay a lot of money to go to university and study in Europe or like in the US. And, because of my background working with the US projects in Afghanistan, I had a green card, because I served US there. So when I was in the UK, I received my green card, and then I came here. But again, like the sentence that Yasmeen said earlier, that it hasn't been a walk in the park, It's been 5 years I'm here working very hard, and like just to be able to have to live like others, who around me. And yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of like stigmas out there, and thank you for talking about it. Yes, and do you want to add anything?
I'll mention something quickly and then I'll hand it over to Rosa. But basically, so my husband's an immigrant and I was there, throughout the whole process of him becoming a citizen. So I helped with the paperwork. I witnessed it, I guess, through second lens because I'm fortunate enough to have been born here. And his family in Cape Verde is well off. And so another thing is he's African. So everyone like thinks like, oh, Africa is a bunch of mud huts and poor people. Like, no. They have beautiful, beautiful architecture, beautiful cities, beautiful infrastructure. Maybe it's not all over, but they have it, and we make all these jokes. Like, I remember explaining to someone that Africa has air conditioning. Like, it's just the funniest thing. It's like, yeah. And then there was this TikTok, and this African woman was making fun of it too. She's like, why do people think that there's no air conditioning in Africa? And she's like, yeah, you know what? It's the elephants. It's their ears, and their ears flap, and then it gives us air.
It keeps pretty cool, yeah, right.
We make jokes at this point because ignorance is funny. Like, let's just take people for a ride, So my husband's father is like the CEO of an airline in Africa, and so his family is like well off. But my husband still went through that immigrant narrative, and he told me, you know, it's so funny how back home it's, you know, we have a maid and you know, we're well off and this, and now I'm here in America in a shitty apartment cleaning up all my own stuff, no maid, and I can barely pay for anything aside from canned food. Like, that's how he started. So even if they come from like a good background out there, you know, the immigration process is not a walk in the park for anyone, and they are humbled when they come here. They are humbled so much. And, you know, it was hard for me to just watch. So I can't imagine being one myself. I know my parents are one. I know he's one. I know I've like witnessed the process, but being in those shoes, that's totally different. So that's why I'm going to hand it off to Rosa, because she's in those shoes and Ava is in those shoes. You know what I mean?
Yasmeen, if you, so sorry, Rosa, if
It's
you
okay.
could
Go ahead.
comment on the maternal culture in African society, you know, that like the other day we had a like very brief chat, and I was like, if we compare the feminist history here to what we had forever in Africa, like still you see more progress. Their culture is more progress compared to here when it comes to gender equality.
Yeah, so essentially, Africa is a huge continent, and every 30 miles, you're going to interact with a different culture. People tend to, you know, say France or Britain and not Europe, but then they say Africa, right? But Africa is so different. Like, every part of it's different. So, with that being said, that disclaimer, and respecting those cultural differences, there is a trend where throughout different parts of Africa, in some corners, you'll actually find a lot of historically matriarchal societies. So for anyone who thinks that only the Western world has freedom for women, you're wrong. Actually, in the history of the world, and a lot of African cultures, societies were matriarchal. Matriarchal. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
I think that's right.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's Arkle. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The last one. That's great. But Rosa, you didn't have a chance.
Yeah. So
What was?
this is this can go for hours in this subject, because yeah, a lot of people, they don't know what that means about immigration. They are not educated about the subject because obviously it doesn't affect them. They don't need to know these things. So they think, oh, or they might say, oh, this is wrong, that people are just crossing the border and they could just file for a permit and stuff like that. It's not that easy. As you said, whoever comes here with a visa, they need to prove that they have money there. They're wealthy, they have a land, they have something to sustain themselves. So if they don't, if they're looking for opportunities, they get denied. That's 100% the truth for the majority of Latin American cultures, especially El Salvador. Not even like the raffles that they do for visas every year. It doesn't participate because they said there's too many Salvadorians here, too many Central American in general. And yeah, a lot of people don't see like the struggle that we go through, and we are the ones that hustle the most because we are the ones that doesn't have any chance. If you get fired from your job, like it's way harder to look for another one. So you're gonna make sure you're there on time. You're gonna make sure you do, even if it's sweeping the floor, that you are the best at it. Like everybody recognizes your work because you want your name to be up high. You want everything to be perfect because you're scared. You cannot apply for unemployment. You cannot apply for any of the governmental assistance like all the people think, oh, they come here to take all our money, our jobs. No, and that's that's the reality. Like those are the people that will never miss a day of work.
I'd like
Yep,
to
yeah.
co-op
It's just dishonest Yeah, I was going to say it's dishonest politicians that are blaming immigrants. It's full stop. It's like if they either didn't research it or they're just deliberately trying to get votes by using a lie, and it's not cool. It really really bugs me. But Yasmeen, you had one other thing to
Yeah,
say.
I'd
I
like
got
to
something
actually
after you're
close
done.
off on what those two ladies said with this. Being an entrepreneur, so something that I noticed when I was in in Africa, specifically Senegal and Cape Verde with my husband in January, is that it's not like, if people aren't provided jobs, they just make a job. They'll make a job. They will come up with some craft. They'll set up a stand on some street and they will just hustle from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. They'll be there. Mm-hmm. And something to say is, like, with immigrants and with the people that I'm talking to about, my heart goes out to you guys, because I think you guys are the real spirit of entrepreneurship. I think you ladies and just immigrants in general, you guys are like, maybe things weren't ideal, but it's about taking fate into your own hands and being the change that you want to see. And that's what being an entrepreneur is all about. Like, I want to create generational wealth. Well, okay, cool. What am I going to do? Being an entrepreneur is about taking that action into your own hands and not waiting for the government. So yeah, immigrants don't benefit from those government programs, just like you said, Rosa. And you guys earn every dollar, every single dollar that you make. Yeah.
Wow. That's really, really sweet. And it's a little bit unfortunate because, of course, I was going to go into something that was nowhere near as heartfelt, which is I was going to talk about the non-gender side of actual privilege. I have a friend, right? And one of the smartest things he ever said, as far as like looking at a lot of, well, especially white men, I think, are starting to be really critical of universities in general. Especially because of the culture that's been developing. And the thing I wanted to discuss to wrap up my side anyway is he put it as they're trying to go after every type of privilege except actual privilege, is how he put it. And so basically what he was trying to say is like, okay, well, we need to help this person because that person doesn't look like this guy right here. And we need to help that person because she doesn't look like this person right here. Like there's lots of stuff like that. But what's going on is when people say, how do we fix the situation? They're saying, oh, well, we do this, and the other thing. But the fact is, the only people who are showing up at universities are people who actually can get the student loans or have family who can afford it. And they're not the working class where once you get to be a teenager, you got to be, helping the family out by bringing some more income. So like that's what he was really getting at, because I know his background. I know that when he was a teenager, he had to live in a tent with his parents for a stint. Okay, and this is in Canada. Okay, living in a tent in the winter in Canada is not something you do because you've got a quirky personality, is basically the way that I'd put it. And like while these different institutions are trying to pick on every reason other than already having a financially stable background, I think a lot of people are losing out. Is there anybody who wants to touch that, or should we just wrap it up? What do you guys think?
I don't know if you ladies had anything to say. I was a scholarship child, so one thing I do have to say is that if it wasn't for the scholarship, I wouldn't have been able to go to college. And I was a straight A student in high school.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I mean, when I came to US, it blew my mind off that how much money people pay. And they are in their 40s and is still paying the student loan. Because in Europe, it's not as bad, and also back in my country and like in that region, education is mostly free, mostly free. So there are costs associated with it, but it's not like anything similar to US. And I was always thinking, who goes to university with this amount of money, like who are those people? Either they are very rich, or then they end up like paying until the end of their life their student loan, and that's inequality right there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's just not an option for some people. It's just so much money, and of course, like many people who've had the good fortune of going to university, many of them say it's who you meet rather than the degree itself, and I definitely agree with that. But like the problem though is it's a barrier to entry. Just like as an entrepreneur, very, very few people can start a business without taking on a loan. and that means that your profitability is cut right off the bat. So those barriers to entry, the financial ones, I think that they're the scariest ones for everybody, regardless of the gender. It costs so much money to just get enough attention to run a business, but everybody has to hustle. That's what I wanted to emphasize through all this. I don't think it's easy for anybody these days, and I just, the only other thing that I'd encourage as a guy who has no real right to tell people how to live or what to do is just everything in your life. I think you need to analyze it and say, it's like, is this serving me? Is this serving other people or not? Is it a net plus or is it a net minus? And if you are perpetuating parts of your culture that it's creating a bill and somebody else is paying it, it's not good. That's my take.
Financial education across the board for every culture, even American culture. So if American culture is turning into a culture of just being in debt, like, is that really sustainable, right? So yeah, but then that just goes into what I do for my business, because that's not sustainable and it needs to change.
I love it. I love it. So I'm very excited to be in a community with all you ladies in the commercial real estate space. I guess I need to do a plug. So my hat says dandoesdeals.com, because that's where I interview all of my commercial syndicators for 506B compliance, because you need a documented social relationship or else the SEC boogeyman will come get you. That's all me. Thanks again. As far as people who are eager to get people reaching out, Yasmeen, you can start it off, I think. LinkedIn's great for me, or dandoesdeals.com. But Yasmeen, what are the ways to reach you so that Ava and Rosa can take your lead?
Yeah, sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. No one has my last name. I know I didn't type it down here. I'm just going to spell it out. Elaywan, Elaywan. No one has my last name. You'll easily find me on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, there's also my business website. You can also reach me through there. It'll go straight to my email.
Mine is
Right,
also Ava Husseini, and I spell it here like AVA, and my last name is HUSSAINI, and you can reach me on LinkedIn.
All right.
Sweet.
And for me, it's going to be Rosa Hernandez. So HERDEZ. So Hernandez. And there you can find also the link for the website.
Sweet. Awesome. So the only thing left is to thank you once again for joining us today. I really appreciate you spending the time. If you want to do us a favor, under Rosa, there might be a big, just hideous red button. It says subscribe on it. And if you hit it, then you don't have to look at it anymore. And it has the added benefit of, it means that YouTube might actually start paying for these videos instead of me. And I think that we're doing a lot of good here. I want to make sure that we get these ideas nice and clear, regardless of all these things. So thank you, Yasmeen, for putting this together. And thank you, Ava and Rosa, for joining. This has been fantastic.
Thank you
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for having us.
Sweet.
Awesome.